Hello and welcome to this episode 143 of Extinctionati. I have Karina with me and I'm going south. In fact, we are all going south. And this episode is going to be about the so-called collapse denial and the collapse deniers. But mostly about the collapse denial as a phenomenon because we're not here to roast individual people. We save that for later. So, yeah, so it's been a rough week for everybody on the planet. I'm somewhat envious of the animals and the plants because they can't read or understand all the bullshit that's going on in the human world. So, anyway, I've been reading a book by one of these prominent collapse deniers, and I've been out in the sun, of course, reading the book on my ear, because that's the best way of reading, and it's so bright as it is here in Greenland in the spring. You get sunburned just by thinking about going out. And also, I've been chatting with the chatbots, and it's always interesting. So lately, I've seen that the chatbots, when you ask them about what's going on in the world, which I did on April 1st, because I thought maybe the bot will serve me up some kind of bullshit April Fool's story. So that was kind of a test. But as far as I could tell, it didn't. Actually, I asked it if the story it served me, the narrative it served me on climate, was that an April Fool's joke? And it said, no, this is for real. This is very serious going south. Okay, so the thing is that okay, let's start with the human deniers first, because they have, you have this Björn Lomborg from Denmark, and you have this other guy from America, and they've all written books which are selling like grass or whatever you say over there. Because they come out with the sort of positive, optimistic message which everybody wants to hear, and therefore they become millionaires overnight with these positive books. So this latest book that I read is called Apocalypse Never. It's by Michael Schellenberger, and to cut a long story short, he's basically doing the very simple trick of saying that, okay, so these guys say that the climate change is going to lead to sea level rise, and everybody will die, or millions will die, or billions will die, or whatever. And then he fact checks the question of how many people die from sea level rise every year. So he makes the question very, very simple, by limiting it to, did 50 people die of sea level rise last year? And it's kind of the core trick of the book, is to just find some kind of metric which shows that this is not very serious, and also pretend that the doomsayers are really saying that everything collapsed and the sea level rose already, and we only have to look at the past or look at the present right now, and that's sort of how, as far as it goes. It's almost like saying that before 1950 that no human will ever jump more than 4 meters, because that was kind of a limit that looked like forever limit at one point. It's almost like saying that no, we looked in the records for high jump, and we've never seen anyone jump as high as 4 meter, so therefore that is out of the question. It can never happen, right? And it's the same thing for 100-meter dash and all the kind of sport. Things happen, and people jump higher and higher, and also the sea level will rise higher and higher, because how could it not? You know, the ice is going south, and the South Pole ice is going north. So that's kind of how things are. And when you go over to the machines, they seem to have this. They are very, very smart, of course, but they seem to be programmed to kind of not connect the dots. So they are like, okay, yeah, the tipping points for the ice caps, they may be crossed soon, you know, just like the IPCC and the UN says. And if you ask it, okay, so you're saying no polar ice caps have tipped, no glaciers have tipped, no sea ice, nothing has tipped yet. Yeah, no. So certain scientists maybe point that out, but overall, we can still act and we can still do something, you know, to avoid. And then if you kind of counter argument or pose questions back systematically on all the weaknesses that it presents. It turns out that it agrees that the sea ice has tipped, the Greenland ice sheet has tipped, the West Antarctic ice sheet has tipped, and even the CO2 Keeling curve from 1958 already tipped before the Keeling curve was launched in 58. So it's almost like, yeah, a friend of mine called it a lobotomized intelligence, right? So it's been coded and programmed to know a lot of stuff, but not be able to connect the dots like we humans are good at, and to kind of give a general impression of the state of the planet. Should we really act? Is it still time to act? And when the chatbot says, yeah, but whether or not we go to 5 meters sea level rise, that's up to us and how we act. And then I counter argue that and say, no, but you already said that the planet is getting hotter and hotter. And even if we stopped all emissions, you yourself said that we won't go colder. So in that scenario, which you actually agree with me about, where you have these feedback loops and self reinforcing mechanisms, there's really no way to stop it going to 5 meter sea level rise, and there's also no way to stop the methane hydrates in the Arctic under the ocean from melting and exploding to the atmosphere, which again will make it warmer and warmer. So these chatbots, they will agree with every part of this, but they can't sort of make an overbuilding for the understanding of the situation. Yeah. So that I think that can be my introduction. I have lots more, but I would like to invite you to take the floor.
Oh yeah, I appreciated your comment at the beginning when you said you're jealous of the wild animals, because I feel the exact same way. I mean I feed a lot of them, and I mean I live in more of an urban area, not like where you live, but it's very forested, and we have a lot of birds and squirrels, and even we've got mice, rats, or whatever you call them, rodents, and it's just a lot of activity, and I am very jealous, especially of the birds and the squirrels too. Um, uh, and going back to what you were saying about tipping points, um, what I've seen official, and this is what I've seen from more mainstream science from the Potsdam Institute, which is which is mainstream, is that I believe they're in Germany. They said that the Arctic and West Antarctic ice sheets have passed the tipping point. They have a whole. I mean, I can share. I don't know if we can share screen. I can show you the whole, all of the all of the areas on the globe that are close to tipping, but those two have already tipped, according to Potsdam Institute, West Antarctic ice sheet and Arctic ice sheets. And then the third thing I wanted to mention was there's a disconnect going on because you've got several things happening. The environmentalist movement and mainstream science, they're all about saving this civilization, which is based on cheap fossil fuels. And we're running out of those cheap fossil fuels. We have to go deeper for them. The main issue is, and Gail Tverberg talks about this, is it's getting to a point where because it will cost more for energy will cost more, as you either have to dig deeper for the oil, or you have to start transporting coal, and you have to add transport costs. So the cost will be too high for the consumer, and then the investor the fossil fuel investor will not have basically there has to be a sweet price. The investor needs a price, the consumer needs a price, and those two have to equal each other. And so investors need more money to for the cost of extraction or the cost of transport. If it's coal, there's tons of coal left. If it's coal, I mean, and we're talking about oil, you need money to dig deeper because it gets costlier to extract. And then, so the consumer can't afford it anymore. And this is what we're seeing now. I think what's happening in France is the start of something big, where showing, in the more privileged Western countries, that we are running out of cheap fossil fuels. And I listened to, I don't know if you've heard of Tim Garrett. He's a what do you call it? An atmospheric scientist. He specializes in aerosols and clouds from the university. I believe it's somewhere in Utah. But he wrote Civilization as a Heat Engine. And he even said that he tweets a lot. And Gail Tverberg also talked about this too, that you need that actually green energy so fossil fuel usage, how should I say this? Green energy requires fossil fuel. So it's not curbing fossil fuel usage. Green energy is increasing fossil fuel usage. It's part of the whole Jevons paradox thing. So basically the confusion here is you've got a group of environmentalists who are trying to save the civilization. So that's where that's the angle that they're seeing things. And then you have you have the doomers who are focused on certainty of NTHE. What the environmentalists are missing is that we're running out of cheap fossil fuels. So they're not talking to the energy people, and it's all, the rise and fall of civilizations is all about energy, So all the environmental scientists, IPCC, no one there is talking about what fuels our whole civilization. And we're in a crisis right now. We're in an energy crisis. And we don't have an alternative cheap energy source. And we can't add any more CO2 to the atmosphere. There's no budget left. It just causes, there's all this confusion and we wouldn't have this many people if fossil fuels hadn't been this cheap. We wouldn't have 8 billion people on the planet. So we're at a crossing point here. And I don't know. I mean, for me, for I'm just trying to watch everything that's happening. I don't have a I'm not attached to any outcome. I'm just trying to get the facts and evidence. That's all I'm trying to do. I
Yeah,
think attached to an outcome, that's when you start losing sight of reality and evidence. And this can, and I see this with on both sides, on all sides of the spectrum.
that's kind of what I try to do with this chatbot from Google as well, because just ask the open general questions, about
Yeah.
how soon and how certain are these things to crash, and I'm not talking about ice sheets and glaciers and stuff, right? Not buildings in New York, but the sort of polar um, extremes, the South Pole and the Greenland ice sheet and stuff. So just check sort of their reality. It's kind of strange to call the chatbot reality, but it's made by humans, and especially if you ask a general question, like what is going on in the world today, which I did, yesterday, then you kind of get the general American progressive understanding of the world. Because let's not beat around the bush, it is progressive. The chatbot definitely votes Democrat. So, so be that as it may. So, despite its reluctancy to join the dots, as I talked about, it did agree with all the basic facts in isolation about where things are going, because of the energy that is already in the atmosphere and the ocean. All of that is heating up and melting the ice, and then making the surface darker, and then triggering the methane on the seafloor. So, and it's basically nothing we can do. And the chatbot really basically agrees that we can't stop it, but keeps harping on about we can act, no, we can still act. There's never too late to act, which is exactly the same that the UN is saying, right? It's the same as the UN Secretary General and the IPCC and all that bullcrap is saying. I have an echo. Do you have an audio on somewhere? You're
No,
not wearing don't have a headset. Okay,
no.
I'll try to just ignore it. Yeah. So, and I've spent some years, as I said on the previous episode, I was triggered by the previous IPCC report to go and look into these things myself, because I totally didn't trust any politicians or media on this issue. And in fact, one of the few top reasons that I actually do believe that a civilization is going to crash is the huge reluctancy from all these powerful, but also in theory responsible for climate and for security and stuff. Their huge reluctancy to admit they crossed tipping point 1, 2, and 3, and say that clearly, and say what that implies, because they are chained or linked in a chain reaction, these tipping points. It's not like, yeah, we crossed one tipping point, but there are 10,000 more. It's more like you if you're in a ski jump competition, right, and you break the first barrier on the top, and the skier goes downhill. No matter how many barriers you have further down the hill, it's going to break all of those because you're already accelerating down the hill, right? At least that's a Norwegian way of explaining things.
Yeah, well, we just the thing is that we don't have paleo records for what humans have done to the planet in the last 200 years. There's no paleo records at the speed at which we've been adding carbon to the atmosphere. So we're really but we still have a lot of ice. I mean, if you look at PETM and Permian, which were the theory is that methane hydrates was behind those. PETM was a minor extinction event, but Permian was just the worst that we have in our records. Those started during warm periods on Earth's planet. We're in a cold period right now, so there's a lot of unknowns, and there's a lot we don't know. Even scientists don't know. And so, and especially if civilization does collapse soon, it could. I mean, some estimates are showing as early as the next few years. And the way things are going in Europe, I mean, wow, that looks crazy. What's happening, with there's just not only in France, but I'm hearing in the Netherlands and Spain. I mean, they're all planning big protests. So a lot going on there,
But
so
that is a bit more on the on the social and the street fighting level, and I think you'll agree that if we as a species don't have agency when it comes to stopping the crazy attack against civilization from the planet itself, from Gaia, then obviously people running around setting cars on fire and whatever in the streets.
Right. We definitely, we definitely don't have agency. We're going to burn every bit of cheap, fossil fuel available that we can. We will not. We just are. I've been trying to understand the human brain, but we are where we're supposed to be. I mean, and there's nothing to change our situation. But what if civilization does collapse in the next few years? We still have ice inertia left. I don't know. I don't know how we can feed this many billions of people if we're running out of cheap fossil fuels. What's going to happen to the planet? Like, I think it's going to be, and it could mean, I'm ready for my death. I could be one of those that dies early. I don't know. But I don't mind if it's going to prevent the planet from overheating, that civilization collapses. I'm just not attached to the outcome. I'm just trying to fit, things could start reversing if civilization collapses and most of the, and there's a little population left. Things could start reversing. There's still a lot of ice inertia. We haven't even begun to, the ocean inertia has taken the brunt of heat added by humans, and ice inertia is about to take over. So if you eliminate most of the population, things could start. What I'm saying is things could start reversing. We just don't see any papers. We don't see papers on this, is because environmentals are trying to save this destructive civilization that kills everything, which I don't understand how an environmentalist would want this to continue,
Yeah, I agree. I think it's pretty clear for everybody who's even looked into it that some humans, or you could say humans, are going to survive, which really means some humans are going to survive. That's obvious because there are just so many of us. It's like the same as saying that some ants are going to survive, obviously, because they are even more multiplicitous, or even more numerous than humans. So we are going to survive, but it will be a totally different state and a different number population, and it will be a very different day-to-day life, obviously. So I think before we go to the civilization collapse itself, I think it's interesting to look at the Just Stop Oil. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but it's one of these Roger Hallam Extinction Rebellion things. Just Stop Oil is sort of the latest over the past year or two campaign. Because to me it's kind of the same as in principle it's kind of the same problem as the one posed by Lord Yu, because Lord Yu came on the scene in 2019 and we had a panel debate which I helped organize and produce for the interwebs live debate, I think. So the problematic or the question is, he wanted people to, if not do it for real, to at least to threaten to withhold the debt payments to the banks. Some kind of idea he had that he wanted to accelerate the collapse by crashing the banks. That obviously
It's already happening. It's happening on
yeah,
its own
yeah,
now.
yeah. It obviously
Yeah.
wouldn't succeed, because you're seeing much bigger problems today than we could create then. And then, but that kind of way of action, to me, it's linked in my head. I mean, to the notion of stopping oil, which is the whole idea of the Just Stop Oil campaign, right? So
Mhm.
because we had a long debate last year on Extinctionati in May or June about it, and also in this May or June 2019 debate with Lord Yu, I argued some of the points at a much earlier stage. So the problem is basically, but because everybody says we need to act, we need to act, we need to act, we need to do something, right? So then to me it's a question of, yeah, but do we need to stop oil? Are we really sure that by stopping oil, or whatever they say, stopping new oil development, whatever, uh, are we sure that by stopping oil or making oil and gas less available, that saves the planet? No, we are not sure about that. For instance, maybe everybody in Africa and in Southeast Asia will chop down the last rainforest just to have energy to cook a meal and heat their homes or whatever. Uh, all kinds of consequences all over the planet, and different all over the planet as well, because people are different and climates are different and situations are different. So when people say, no, we should go all in with the economic sabotage thing in 2019, or we should go all in to stop oil and gas, it's kind of a what do you call we call it
It's futile. It's
it's
futile.
kind, yeah, there is also kind of a student or a sort of a teenager-ish thing that, yeah, we just decide something and then we stop that thing and then we solve everything. uh, uh, yeah, so I think if you're going to act, you need to be pretty sure that you won't make the planet worse when you do it, right? Because you could stop inflation in America by dropping a nuclear bomb on it, then the inflation is gone. But is that a real solution to the problem? So I think the whole notion of sort of acting because it feels good, or acting because we have so short time, acting because of blah blah blah. Uh, no, I don't think we should, um, uproot ourselves and turn everything upside down just for some idea that some activist has got. Like you said last week, do we want to have food on the table before
Exactly.
collapse happens or not? I would choose the food option. It sounds better, sounds easier, and
Okay, so I would too, because of course I want to survive as long as possible. However, what for me, I know, I mean, I'm not like I said, I'm not attached to any outcome, but the best thing is just to let go and let nature take over, take I mean, we are part of nature, but we've just gone a little bit, too far. And anyway, it's gonna collapse on us anyway. So I say just do what you can to help wildlife and prepare for the changes coming, and and it's inevitable. We can't. I mean, it just. I just. I'm hearing. I'm just seeing collapse around me more and more, and it's a blessing in disguise for nature. That's if it means my own death, but just there's really nothing more that can be done. It's collapsing on its own. The civilization is collapsed. This civilization based on cheap fossil fuels is collapsing.
Yeah, that's interesting because I mentioned to you after last week's show that I may probably have some very interesting person on the side who may come into one of the future shows about to question some of the climate stuff, right? And he is also let's just say he has some hopes and some ideas about how to solve the energy problem. And it's very sort of out there, but it's kind of interesting. And when we're all missing Lord Yu very much, I think having that kind of what can you call him? Justly, I would say very colorful and very interesting personality from his work, from what he's doing. I don't care about some other old man's personal life. I care about what he's doing with his time and with his thinking.
Have
So
you heard of? I just I want to make sure to make this comment in addition to what you mentioned about the guests. Have you heard of Richard Heinberg from the Post Carbon Institute?
yeah, I've heard about most of the people you name drop on
Yeah,
here. Yeah.
yeah. So Richard Heinberg is basically he's been writing books that we're running out of cheap fossil fuels, but he he's saying start getting ready for just start getting closer to your community, start building community, get out of the monetary system. um Also just start getting used to things, get used to having less, and also if he's like, it sounds like he's thinking that things are getting pretty extreme, because he said that if anything we should try to salvage the grid because of information on the grid. If there's anything we can salvage, let's salvage the electrical grid. I mean, so to me that sounds pretty doomy. If on his end, which I see things as very dooming, but he's coming from a more on the mainstream side of things, and for him to saying we need to save the grid means that things are getting pretty bad with running out of energy,
I
cheap
think you can
energy.
just wave the grid goodbye. Pretty sure. That's one of the very first things to go. And
Yeah, yeah.
so these guys or these intelligence AI bots, they're like, we need to act, we need to act, we need to act. You can just see. We need to act to avoid the worst effects of everything. So it's kind of a mantra or a dogma that we need to act. So I'm thinking that maybe one of the very few things that we are still able to do or act around is maybe for the collapse itself. Mentally we are kind of preparing for the idea that having a collapse of human society, human systems, the grid and everything, is maybe the only thing that can save a natural world, can save the biosphere. I think that sounds plausible. So in that context, you have what just collapsed from Australia, from Tasmania, who were guests on his show twice last year
Mhm.
on my invitation. What they are talking about is we need to start dismantling these nuclear power plants around the
Yeah.
world. But this Schellenberger guy who wrote this Apocalypse Never book, he says he actually runs a pro-nuclear office in Washington or something. He's gone all in for nuclear. But, so if we're talking not about stopping civilization collapse, and not about stopping climate where it's going, I think the most ethical and moral thing that we can do as individuals and as a humanity is to prepare the aftermath um, for the collapse
Mhm.
by taking away the absolute most toxic and radioactive and long-lasting dangers that we have in our stupid societies, and starting with the not yet closed nuclear power stations, because those are going to go belly up and just destroy entire regions, for thousands of years.
I
As
mean,
far as I know, anyway.
I would love that to happen, but it's not going to happen. It's all of this is going to we have no power to stop that because they're going to try to continue the civilization as it's going to have to be forced on us. I mean, of course you and I would like to do that, um but the people in charge, they're going to try to keep it going for as long as it goes. So I don't know what you do about I've heard there's about 450 nuclear reactors around the world. That's serious. I mean, um if anything, just maybe have a group prepared post collapse that can I know that that may sound hopium-ish. After everything collapses, maybe have a group of people who work there go and do what they can after everything has collapsed. But before, it's going to be impossible because people, this it, they're gonna try to get this system going. I don't know if this is gonna collapse. Like, have you? Is it? Are they called Jenga puzzles, where the whole thing just collapses very quickly all at once? Like major key points are removed, and so the whole thing just or connections. Major connections because the system is so complex are removed, and the whole thing just collapses together.
They
Um,
need, I think they need basically two things.
yeah.
They're all placed near a lake, or a river, or a seashore, so they obviously need the water for cooling, and then they can't they can't produce the electricity that they need to run. So if
Hmm.
the grid goes down, so even
Hmm.
if this power station is creating electricity, it can't. At least the old ones. I don't know about the new ones, but most of these power stations, they can't run if the grid goes down. Then they have to fire up some diesel aggregators or something. So they basically go down the same day everything else goes belly up. Like there's a
Yeah.
hurricane or a tsunami or whatever, and everything goes to shit. The Japanese one, that was a tsunami.
Oh,
Uh,
Fukushima. Yeah.
yeah, most people say it was natural and there was a wave, big tsunami wave, and then it went belly up. Other people say it was an American computer virus that was spread by USB sticks all around the planet, intended for some Iranian nuclear power stations, but it ended up as friendly fire against the Japanese. Yeah, I don't think we can ever get the full truth about that, but yeah. So I think the key to making this happen would be for some kind of EU or UN or some high level thing to enforce it, and you would have to sell it as a security thing. You know, you can't go full bore and say this is because we're going to collapse. This is no, just forget about that. You have to sell it in as a let's say climate change, extra security, close down measures, right? Just like you have all kinds of standards in Europe and America now. You have health, environment, and security in Scandinavia, and
The
in
problem
Europe.
is, Torstein, I don't mean to interrupt.
In
Yeah.
Europe, you have equity and diversity and all of this kind of stuff. So you have all these standards, and
Mhm.
the obviously the most relevant standard for a fucking nuclear power station would be that it's possible to shut it down in a timely manner if the worst thing should happen. It shouldn't have to be so hard to get these things regulated so that every power station in Europe and America at least has to comply and have these plans. You know, not just plans, but
Yeah, I just don't. The problem is that I don't trust the people in charge. That's the they're just. I mean, just to see, especially in the West. I mean, what I'm watching in the West, the U.S. and the West, we have complete crazy people in charge that are pushing us off the cliff. Um, you know, I don't know. I consider the UN to be part of the West. I don't know. You know, all they're doing is they're just trying to destroy things faster, and I just don't find them competent at all. You know,
mhm.
so I feel like what you're saying. I mean, I would love that to happen, but it's just sadly, I think that might be hopium.
Yeah. That's okay, but the only argument I'm making is that if there was going to be some kind of action uh, still available for us in the collapse situation, that would have to be some that kind of action that is, like removing toxic ponds or chemicals or whatever that gets into nature,
Mhm.
cleaning the shit up,
Yeah.
and having a procedure that could close down. Even if you don't know the procedure today in 2023, establishing a procedure by throwing money on research and stuff, that every power station could be closed down in say 3 or 4 years after an incident, after a collapse, right?
Mhm.
That would be the only type of action that would make sense the way I see it. Apart from individual preparations and learning to hunt and gather, basically. Yeah.
It's interesting. I was watching just this quick video of these dogs that were abandoned in Fukushima. I mean, in what was that explosion in Russia or in Ukraine?
Chernobyl.
Yeah, these dogs that were left behind, but they were pets and they were just left behind when all the citizens, left the area, and they've survived. They've kind of created their little pack. Um, and they don't live long because of disease, and also they've got issues with shelter, something like that. But yeah, so it's interesting to look at the dogs that have survived Chernobyl,
Yeah.
and in the wolves that have come in. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some of the shorts videos from it.
Yeah.
I didn't watch the full documentary or series or whatever. yet, so I have still to see that.
Yeah.
But of course, for us growing up, I think we were born in the same year. For us growing up it was a
Oh
great,
yeah.
massive shock in the 1980s, 1986, I think. Yeah, that was for me. I think it was basically then that I kind of was freaked out for the first time about the environment. Yeah, that was probably it, and it also increased the focus in the media in Scandinavia about everything environmental. So because
Yeah.
86 was my Greta Thunberg year. I was 15 years old in 1986, so obviously I was going to jump on that train. Not just the nuclear thing, but the entire sort of ecological thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, you're much. I was very delusional throughout my life. I mean, about what was really happening. I'm a city girl. I always liked cities. Even though I grew up in from age 5 to 10 in Venezuela, and my dad would take us hiking up to the cloud rainforest because the Andes start in Venezuela. And the cloud, we would go hiking, but when I moved to the US when I was 10, I became very city, enjoyed the city. And so when you're in the city, you really um I wasn't paying that much attention to nature, you know. So yeah, my big wake up moment was 2016. I had basically, yeah,
2016? Why is that?
2016. I saw a Guy McPherson video, and I
Oh,
mean, I kind of okay. So I kind of was worried before 2016 because I was living in Southern California, and it felt like um it was starting to feel uncomfortable there. The droughts were getting pretty bad. So that's one of the reasons I moved to Oregon. And so I was kind of thinking something's not right. And then I ran into a Guy McPherson video. I was very upset after Bernie Sanders, what happened to Bernie Sanders. And and so I was kind of in a very dark time. And then I ran into a Guy McPherson video, and I realized that the because of his video, I realized the climate situation is kind of what was I was feeling in my gut, that things were really bad. But it wasn't until, I mean, so just a few things before 2016, but then really it was 2016 where I was like, oh my
mhm.
god. It was almost a relief because um my gut was feeling something, so to be able to surface what was I was feeling in my subconscious, to confirm that, it was a relief. But I did go through serious grieving after that.
Hmm. I can totally see the relief part because it's like, when I talk to one of my buddies, he's from Armenia, but I know him from Oslo, right? When we talk about all the things that are so totally messed up on the planet and in society and the war and everything, he's an anarchist and he's always been anti-war and a military draft refuser and everything, right? So whenever we talk on the Fridays or whatever, it's like these days we can finally say that yeah, but all of that is going to be solved when just this whole thing comes crashing down. So we don't have to solve, we don't have to go out and sort of uh, try to loosen up the knots and make people be friends and all kinds of things that you would otherwise do, because everything is just going down and nobody will care if you are this and that or from this or that country or whatever after the collapse, because then it's just depending on the situation in your area, it's every humans help each other or every stranger is shot on sight. it takes it down to a much more basic level, and of course, all the ecological things are bound to start improving. I wrote a poem maybe 3 4 years ago about plastic pollution and microplastics. So I kind of wrote it from the planet's, from Gaia's perspective, and the only way to stop the fucking plastic pollution is to have the entire system come down, and then
Exactly.
and only at that moment the oceans can begin to heal, because then more and more plastic will either evaporate or melt on the beach or sink to the bottom. It will just gradually go out of circulation, right? Because you get layers of mud or whatever on the bottom of the lakes and the oceans and the fjords. So the only way to just get it to start to improve is to shut down all the industry, which is impossible to do politically. You can never get all the factories to shut down. The only way to do that is for everything to just collapse. Yeah.
Exactly. And that plastic is fossil fuel. So that's collapsing. And um so yeah, no, I mean, um I think that this whole civilization could really collapse. I mean, um we'll have to see. We'll have to see day to day what happens. We're just in unknown territory right now. I mean, we are in some crazy times. And it's scary but fascinating at the same time.
Maybe you would like to go into the El Nino southern ice situation. Is that something you would like to uh,
Yeah,
venture into?
yeah. Oh, is that what you mean? What we were talking about earlier?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to. So James Hansen. I want to start. Okay, I want to start with. Oh man, a quote from James Hansen's. Do you want to continue talking while I find the quote from his paper this year?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We're coming up to. I didn't start my stopwatch, but we're coming up to an hour break in maybe 5 minutes. I'm not sure, but when that happens, the lady says streaming is off, and then I have to do something very fast with my keyboard, and then she will say streaming is on again, and then you can carry on talking. So,
You know what, Torstein, I've got to leave pretty soon. So why don't
all
we
right.
do this? Why don't I'll be prepared with the information for next Sunday. How about
Mm-hmm.
that? And we'll just continue until it stops. And I have to head on out. But
Yeah,
I'll have it ready to go for our next chat on next
but
Sunday.
can we just touch on it? It's about some theory about how the El Nino uh, in the Pacific can be delayed or cancelled uh, due to some iceberg interactions with the temperature layers. Is that correct?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to back up a little bit, and just tell you where my research, like, I'm just a regular person with no science background. I read James Hansen's book twice because it's very hard to read. It's a lot of physics, and I was very shocked because most of the climate models were saying we should have El Ninos, but we just finished a triple dip La Nina. We're neutral now, but we could go back into a La Nina, or some are predicting El Nino. Um, what what was interesting I read this article based on a paper that the IPCC hasn't modeled ice sheet melt very well in their models. And so in James Hansen's book, he talks about three sources of inertia. The first is ocean, and when I'm saying inertia, to absorb the heat added by humans. The first source is oceans. The second source is ice inertia, and the third is global energy systems. And the global energy systems means that are we going to continue adding CO2 to the atmosphere? Um, and other greenhouse gases, of course, too. So the first one, the ocean. So the oceans have taken the brunt of the heat, more than 90%. And the second one is ice inertia, and that is starting to take effect, particularly in Antarctica right now. It really hasn't been activated until the last 2 years. It's really starting to. Ice sheets take longer to melt. It's a slower feedback, and most of the ice, when we're talking about inertia, is in Antarctica and Greenland. Those are the two main inertia areas. And so I don't know if you guys have been following what's been happening in Antarctica, but it's really, the ice is really, the melt is really picking up, and um, and I have images showing, like, the icebergs that are, how the ice, when it cuts off from Antarctica, how it travels around
Mm.
Antarctica before it goes into it's called Ice Alley or something like that, close to the tip of Argentina. Sorry, you'll have to fact check me on all this stuff because my memory is not the best. But so basically, there's a guy named Chris Van Steenbergen. He's on Twitter. He's an independent scientist, and he follows a lot of the temperatures, um, around the world. He follows the ice in both poles. He follows all the satellite data information and all that stuff. And he's an apocalyptimist, and he is definitely trying to save. I get the impression this civilization. He's got faith in humanity and technology to save this. Um, However, he's been, mainly he's talking about all the dire stuff happening in the Arctic, and I'm sure it'll be resumed now that we're moving into the summer of the Northern Hemisphere. But in the South, he's been tracking all of the ice that has been breaking off of Antarctica, and he seems to think, and it seems like he's talking to other scientists that are about this too. He seems to think that the ice melt from the ice, just the inertia, the ice melt is going to um, could get us back into another La Nina, or and slow down the heating that's happening.
But do you think he is Sam Karana?
What was that?
Do you think he is Sam Karana?
Oh, definitely not, because Sam Carana doesn't
Okay.
even talk about ice inertia at all.
Okay.
Sam Carana never has mentioned this ice inertia. In fact, I'm not even. I mean, you're hearing about sea level rise, how terrible sea level rise is. The only one that I've heard talk about this ice inertia, and I did see a paper about it too, about the melting off Antarctica could slow down warming. I saw a paper about that came out a couple of years ago. So why? So something is going on here, and we just have to wait and see. You know what I mean? It's just um, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But you know what? Let me just read his last tweet. That would help. Hold on
Yeah.
1 second. Let me just read his last tweet.
Let's do that.
Sorry, my computer is kind of slow.
Just answering the chat.
Okay, this is his. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. This is he tweeted this 23 hours ago. Our climate system is so genius that it can and will save itself. The average sea surface temperature shoots up, but the temps of the entire column drop due to meltwater. The global mean temperature follows the sea surface temperatures. The Nino indices follow the cooling, and the sea level is falling. Okay, I don't know. That might. Okay, so let me just read something that's a little bit more clear from a few days ago. Okay, he wrote this on March. He tweeted this on March 25th. When an iceberg reaches Joinville and D'Urville Island, the northernmost point of West Antarctica, I think it's going to be very interesting. Did you want me to finish reading that, or did you get the
Oh, I
gist of
was muted. I was muted. Yeah, please finish it. I think also it will be
Okay.
very interesting with the April, seeing these graphs go up or down for April. So we will definitely keep an eye on that in the
Okay, so I'm going
meetings
to
to
just
come.
okay. Wait, did you say for me to speak up?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'll reread it since we were cut off. Okay, so this he tweeted on March 25th. When an iceberg, I'm repeating this. When an iceberg reaches Joinville and D'Urville Island, the northern point of West Antarctica, the Nino 3.4 index drops almost immediately within less than 5 days, a few tenths of a degree. It seems that iceberg D38 is going to pass the coast of Joinville Island next week. Okay, so let me just continue on here. Okay, so on March 30, he tweeted, exciting. Usually I hope I'm wrong, especially when I'm predicting sea level rise or when I project glaciers to retreat. But now I really hope I'm right. It must be, otherwise we're screwed. Um,
It's
and
a
then,
it kind of sounds like he's clutching at straws. It's like you're hanging by the side of the cliff, outside of the cliff, and there are some straws that you can barely hang on to. And so, isn't this a part of the psychological? What do you call that? The negotiation
oh,
stage?
delusional thinking or cognitive
Yeah,
dissonance.
yeah. Because interestingly, when I was, in earlier years, especially around 2016, when you came along, and the years after that, when I was YouTubing about this, about the sea ice and stuff, I found that I always did it without a manuscript. I didn't want to have a
Mhm.
script because I wanted to just, freely associate and whatever. And I found out because I didn't have a manuscript, my mind, or rather my heart, I think, just sort of slowly glide over to hoping these things would crash and would melt out. And it
Mhm.
wasn't planned, but it was kind of where my heart really was, and
Mhm.
it's kind of inspired by the deep ecology that I learned in university, with RNS and Derek Jensen and stuff. So it went back to sort of my teens or my 20s when I started thinking and exploring the planet.
Yeah.
So the basic thing is that the living planet has a lot of intrinsic value that is um, independent of humans. It's not like the planet is worthless. Nature is worthless if no human wants to pay for it. It has a lot of value, and every living thing has its own value that comes from within in itself. And yeah, so I kind of slowly slided over to hoping it would speed up, so accelerate, and that we would have this civilization collapse, because that's the only way that the animals would run free, and the cows and the pigs and the chickens would be released, and everybody would have a good day.
Yeah. Well, we are still running out of cheap fossil fuels, so that's a bit that seems. I mean, that seems to be real. It just in the evidence seems to be apparent. So then we also have the aerosol masking effect. And we can discuss that in the next episode. The aerosol. I've been following aerosols. That's James Hansen covers that a lot. It's very interesting. We can that's for another topic.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so I say the way I look at it, we just take it day to day. We'll see what happens now. It should be very exciting and scary at the same time. You know what I mean? But we're in unknown territory. And Chris Van Steenbergen, he wants to save the civilization. I don't. I mean, but I'm not attached to an outcome. But I'm just letting it be free and let it all rip. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Ultimately,
I'm kind of
yeah.
on.
Go
Sorry,
ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm kind of on the fence, because I like civilization. I like I
Yep.
like universities. I like
Yeah.
goth music, and uh, paintings, and special type of literature. Lots of things that I like, and I also actually like computers, and being able to talk to interesting people on the other side of the planet, or maybe not the other side, because we are at least Greenland and Oregon is on the same continent, so it's not completely the opposite side of the planet. But lots of things that I appreciate. Uh, Also cultural stuff, like maybe not in America, but in Greenland at least, going downtown uh, to shop, or go to the pub or whatever. People are civil and
Mm-hmm.
nice, and you don't have to have a shield and a sword just to go down the pub. You don't have to you know carry a lot of weaponry all over. Uh, all of those kind of things that we take for granted in many parts of the world. Um, Once you're out of the civilization phase, it's more like a knife on your throat. Yeah, so lots of things to appreciate, but I think in the final equation for me anyway, it's more like it's unsustainable. It can't go on, and we have to make sure that the living planet lives on, because that's kind of the be all and end all of everything. Uh, yeah, so
Yeah.
I think I'm on your side, that I wanted to crash, but that's only to save, because we're sort of forced into a corner, and we have to choose. We have to choose between civilization and the biosphere, and that's why I want to preserve, or see the biosphere prevail.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much out of our control. The only thing I mean, I'm just trying to build community here, um, and just take it day to day. And I think what helps me get through, like, I volunteer at the local shelter, a dog walk, and just the people I meet there are so wonderful, and it gives me a feeling, just of, I don't know, like something special, you know, um, and when things collapse further, um, community will be important, and you know, that's all I can say. But just enjoy. I really live the moment now. Enjoy every day. Just with the little things in life. That's all you can do.
Yeah, it's like we said earlier at about the relief thing we
Yeah,
talked about from 2016, because when when you no longer have to solve every problem in the world that is big and important and grave, it's relieving, then you
yeah,
can finally go out in the sun and make angels in the sun, or have a snowball war, or whatever you want, or surf the fjord, and or just watch the eagles and the ravens, right? So,
yeah. Oh,
hmm.
I'm trying to make friends with the crows. We don't have ravens. Ravens are more in the wildlife. Crows are more urban. But I'm trying. I'm
Hmm.
so desperately wanting to become friends with crows.
Hmm. We've
So yeah,
had the white birds coming back this week, the past 2 days, starting on April Fool's Day. The seagulls and all of these white-colored seabirds, they are
oh,
flying in from the south, so you can see them like a mile high in the air, coming from South Greenland or even further south. So this is the spring season. They don't care. They don't bother to hang out here in the winter. So then there's
yeah.
only ravens and eagles in the winter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's the mating. Help them with their nests. A friend of mine told me to put bread, so they soak bread um, to get water to their babies
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
to their chicks. Yeah,
Yeah, I think the seagulls up here are so professional. They dive down to the blue mussels,
yeah,
blue mussels, and they have also these what do you call these corona shaped buns that you have in the sea. It's called crow balls, or crow buns in Norwegian.
nice.
Um, Urchins, I think they call urchins, sea urchins, something like that.
Yeah,
So,
that
so
sounds. Yeah.
yeah, so they dive for them as well. So you have lots of shells on the land after the seagulls and the ravens. So
Oh,
and actually, birds up here, they don't actually eat your bread. You can stand all day throwing bread into the fjord. They don't care about it, because it's a it's so lush, it's so plentiful with everything up here. We have you can almost walk on the fjord because there's so much fish.
oh
Uh,
wow.
so good luck trying to get. I have some bread now that I'm going down to the fjord tonight to give to the birds, but I've never seen them eat anything, because I think they are just totally fed up with luxury seafood that is totally clean and free of salt and free of all kinds of human toxic ingredients. So
That's
yeah,
funny. I'm gonna in our
yeah,
next chat. I've got to go now, but there's a very interesting study I read about the eastern part of Greenland. But I'll keep that as something special for the next
yeah.
show. But I got to get
Would,
going now.
would you
Um,
like to would you like to say goodbye to everybody, to the
yeah.
audience?
I'll have to check out the YouTubes and see the comments. Yeah,
Hmm.
check out the comments on YouTube.
But can you say thank you to the
Oh,
crowd?
thanks to everyone, and I hope you guys can join us. It would be fun to get a few people an addition on to our show.
Absolutely, totally.
Yeah, and it's not scary. I mean, I can't believe Torstein. I refuse to do this until Torstein convinced me. I can. I mean, this was very scary, but once you take the plunge, it's not as scary as I thought it would have been. Yeah, but thanks to everyone.
I'm really a kind guy. Okay, bye.
Bye, Torstein. Thank you, Torstein, for making this show happen. Really appreciate everything you, not only this, but everything you've done for our community when you were on Extinction Radio, just all the Arctic information, great stuff.
Well, that's too much.
Everything you've
Okay.
done for our community. Okay.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
And I look forward to next Sunday. Take care.
Bye.